Thanks,
Thank
Larry.
you. Thank you.
Doug Ross is not here tonight. He's using work as an excuse again. I understand that he had a big auction. I hope he did well with that. Our featured speaker tonight is Rich Hoffman. I met Rich about 4 years ago. And if you recall, the Lakota School District, it seemed like every time you turned around, there was another levy on their ballot, and they always passed. And then there started to become some resistance to that. And as all of you are aware, the school portion of your property taxes are the overwhelming portion of your property tax. And one of the ways that you can at least get an informed voter constituency out there is using facts and figures and trying to put aside a lot of the emotion. This is where Rich has really excelled. He's dug in, looked for the facts, the numbers, and presented those in a very persuasive way over the past several years, and it's made a huge difference in how the vote has gone in Dakota. Rich, I'm going to turn it over to you and hope that you'll impart some of your wisdom.
All right. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody for inviting me out. It meant a lot to me when Carl asked me 8 months ago to come tonight on this event. And I know a few of you. I've met you around town. I know Annie quite a bit. We bumped into each other at various functions. And I know some of you do read my blog, which was created out of a necessity to help control the media a little bit and in favor of our position. Now I'm going to tell you, I'm going to start present day and work backwards and give you the history. In relation to what's going on, I think we all feel a little bad about how the election went, disappointed. To me, these things all connect. And the things that are happening right now with the fiscal cliff, with Boehner and my friend Obama, represents a lot of what we face, whether you're talking about the city of Oxford and how it allocates funds for a movie theater or how to put bricks in a street or fund your school. They're all the same. They require concerned people to be involved in the process and to hold people like your treasurer accountable. And it's wonderful that you have one that's here and a school board member that actually attends these meetings, because that's a big step in helping regulate your costs. I mean, if everybody's not involved, of course, things get out of control. And we see that at the national level. It's absolutely appalling to think of the amount of debt that we're dealing with. You can't even get your mind around it. So rather than deal with all that, a few years ago I decided to work with the costs that are out of control in my local district. Because if you can't solve the problems in your backyard, really don't have business trying to solve problems in the faraway land of Washington, D.C. So before I get into all this, I'd like to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. It would have been nice to say Christmas. Nice when, never thought we'd have a day when doing the right thing would be an act of rebellion. But I don't like the happy holidays. So it's a few days away. It's been a very interesting year. We're all feeling a little down and out from and where we are. But I'll just have to say this. You know, we're not in a populist movement. We're never going to be popular. And when you try to put the brakes on spending, people aren't going to like you. It's often going to be a contentious debate. And hey guys, you check to see if that thing's on. I'm recording this. You're not going to be popular. And the Tea Party, right after the election, I went to a few meetings, and there was a lot of hard feelings. People really felt that we were down and done, that it was over, and that the Tea Party was on its way out. And if you listen to the progressive left, of course they want you to feel that way. And I think there's those of us with our eyes open, we can see the game that's being played. A lot of people aren't there yet. And they're not going to get there until they see the amount of taxes that are going to go up when Obamacare is implemented. And they're not going to understand that they have an obligation as voters to say no to some of these things. And what we did at Lakota a few years ago, I'll give you the story, is we started to say no and force this never-ending spending idea to get their arms around it and handle it. Instead of being a wild horse running around the pasture, kicking and just going nuts and asking for more hay all the time. So, some of you know me. Those of you who don't, I'm not the kind of guy that likes to color in the lines. I kind of like to make my own coloring book. Just give me a blank piece of paper and I'll write my own, but I don't color in lines very well. So if this is a normal speech where I was introducing myself, I might tell you a long resume of all the different companies I've been involved in and how I've helped cut costs and save for a quarter of a century, which is hard these days. That I raised 2 children and they're starting to have children of their own. Well, I wrote 2 books. One book called The Symposium of Justice came out in 2004. The latest one, Tail of the Dragon, just came out last September. I might tell you that some of my best friends are sword swallowers, knife throwers, gun spinners, whip masters, lasso people who like to preserve the Western arts. And I've been a part of that for over 30 years, and it's very important to me. Because the old cowboy arts of John Wayne and Clint Eastwood and the old Paul Newman movies, I like those. And I want to see them stay around. I want my grandsons to be a part of that and understand what that means. So I'm really keen on preserving traditional arts. And those people that are in that group with me mean a lot to me. But what I'll share with you how I kind of see myself and how I measure my successes by describing how my enemies see me. Because that is, you know, these politicians always go wrong when they want to be liked. If you're liked, you're probably not doing something right. You know, if everybody likes you, you're probably failing somewhere. And when you spend a lot of time and energy trying to appease to everybody's whims, you're not managing your responsibilities. Someone's always just like being a parent. You can't always do what the kids want you to do. You have to kind of manage them. And if you're guarding, if you're a treasurer of a school district, you have to, if you have control of that kind of thing, which you often don't, you have to kind of put the alarms up and force people to adhere to the rules.
I'm not Mike. I'm not Mike.
Yeah, that's good. Because if you're in any kind of management at all, you know that you're probably not going to be liked. And if you want to be liked, you should probably be in a beauty pageant somewhere, because you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. So I kind of measure my success on how many people hate me. I think that's a better way to gauge how well you're doing your job. So if you go by my record of 2012, there are a lot. I'm doing very well. So I'm going to. I've done a lot of local television. I've done a lot of local radio, particularly on 700 WLW. I've done national radio shows around the country. And I like that. I've had a lot of print. I've been in a lot of newspaper articles. I've been quoted in all the local papers, even Forbes and some Yahoo News features. I've made a lot of noise, and it's been fun. I've enjoyed it a lot. Some of my entertainment past, I've helped bring the issue to the forefront, get a little attention, because the media likes colorful personalities, and it helps you get if you have an articulate argument, it helps you get it out there. So I've used my my bullwhipping and my media background and some of my literary abilities to stir the pot a little bit and get some discussion going. So you use what you're good at, and so I did. And have a lot of enemies. And I'd like to, I had a whole bunch of articles that were very negative that I could have drawn from, but one of my favorites, I'm going to share with you just little quotes from it, was from an article from the Examiner, and that's a Denver-based online publication. And it was a local writer by the name of Steve Morrison, who attended this university, and he writes regularly for many papers, but particularly the Dayton Progressive. And he wrote a really fascinating article about me called Lakota and the Lash of Extremism. And he wanted to accentuate on my Wild West dealings and some of my friends that like to swallow swords for fun. But I've been a bullwhip artist for a long time. I do target cutting, and we have competitions every year with, at an Annie Oakley Festival up in Dark County. So he wanted to take a shot at that, and then I'll get into the reasons why. But here's what he said about me. It says, Rich Hoffman is the preeminent anti-levy bully. He lives the bumper sticker, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. The Cincinnati Enquirer has reported that bullwhip performer, let that marinate for a while, is in a heap of big trouble for what he has had to say about his female critics on his blog, Overman Warrior's Wisdom. And I know you know what I'm talking about. And it suggests going to the links and reading all the things I said. And he goes on to say, let me describe what it must feel like to many women. And he makes a bullwhip sound with some words here. It says, on his blog, you have the very face of arch conservative political activism. Fringy, scary, largely unnecessary. Hell-bent on low to zero taxes, and in the instance above, less than, shall we say, tolerant of women's issues and viewpoints when they do not align with his own. Who better to dictate fiscal policy to a school district of 17,000 students? And then he goes on to pick on Kelly Coles a little bit, the Lebanon Tea Party, and suggests that her and I collaborated because she's in some of my videos. And then he says here at the end, he says, the First Amendment commands their input. And then it says to his progressive allies, it commands the same from progressives ad infinitum. Well, the Enquirer article that he's referring to, this came out March 14th, and this is on the eve of a meeting that I had with Ann. I knew it was going to be a heck of a wild ride because I kind of deliberately poked the fire a little bit for a good reason. But it came to my attention that in February of last year, I had been fighting these levies for 3 years, and still same kind of treadmill kind of thing goes on. And again, I'll tell that in my backstory. But we had our third levy defeat, and we felt that was a mandate to the school district to take a 5% cut, to suggest that at least to the teachers union, say, ask your members to lower their wages by 5%, and you'll be balanced, and you won't have to ask for taxes. 18,000 people said this is what they want. So elections have consequences, so this is what you need to do. And they didn't do that. They started doing the same old thing, cut more busing, cut more sports, more pay for play, the standard thing that comes out of Columbus that education activists have put in place through legislation. And their hands are kind of tied. They can't do a whole lot about it, but they didn't even try to play the game, at least put it out there and ask the question, which I never expected the union to take it, but I at least wanted the question to be asked. Instead, of course, they attacked me. And what happened was some of you always have these levy radicals that, it's usually these 28, 29, 30-year-old mothers, new mothers that have 5- and 6-year-old kids, and they're still kids themselves. I mean, they're still learning to be comfortable parents. So every little time their kid falls off a bicycle, they scream and yell, and they're all panicky and everything. And that's fine, but don't ask us to pay for your neurosis. You're growing up and learning, and but the school uses them. So since they don't have leverage with the union, they use those people to help push levies. So they bring them into the little inner circle, and use those people to be the attack dogs. And what these people did, PTA mothers, a little group of them gathered outside a Kroger store by my house and did a survey where they asked as people entered the store, they asked what a detriment I was to the community. And they published these findings on a site that all the sports kids' parents hang out on called Yappy Sports. And I caught wind of it. People told me it was going on. They were going into Kroger, and my name was coming up. And it made me mad. In fact, it made me really mad. And so I went on I have my blog. So I wrote a scathing report of what I thought about those women. And I said, in delicate terms, that they were latte-sipping prostitutes with rear ends the size of car tires and diamond rings to match. And I didn't appreciate what they did. And I went on with some more color than that. Needless to say, it caused a bit of a stir, which I kind of thought it might.
You think?
Caused a little bit of a stir, and they really weren't sure what to do with that information. I had a close relationship with Michael Clark for a long time, couple of years, and him and I would talk often, and it was always fair. I never asked him to show favoritism to my point of view. It was just give me equal press. You give them press, the school that is. So I want the opposing side give me press. So we had a decent relationship. He was under a little bit of pressure by the school because he couldn't beat the arguments that I was giving. So he sort of turned on me and did a hit piece on me, and that came out in the Inquirer, which if you had the radio on March 15th of this year, you would have heard my words over and over and over on every FM station, all the AM stations, and of course the newspapers reported heavily. And it was an attempt to play the woman hater argument that you saw against Romney. The exact same kind of thing done at a local guy. It was done on the national stage. That's because it's part of the progressive movement, and anybody who's educated in that thinking functions the same way. So before I go and tell the whole story, I'm going to give you a few reports of what also came out in the Inquirer that day from two of those latte-sipping prostitute type mothers. This was actually said in the Inquirer. Kim Hesseljeser, I guess was her name, Hesseljeser, said she was very saddened for this extremely disturbed man meeting me. To me, it is evident that he has some agenda that goes far beyond increased school taxes. Although I hate the fact that he's getting exactly what he wants, a lot of media attention. I feel it worthwhile to make the public aware of who they truly are supporting when they are placing no Lakota signs in their yard. Pro-levy or no levy, is he the type of person you want leading a group in our community? And then another mother, Laura Sanders, says, Mr. Hoffman uses misogynistic and vile language when addressing women and mothers because most teachers are, in fact, women and mothers. He wants the public to think that he is merely attempting to rein in public school spending, but his underlying mission is really one of hatred and fear of women earning decent salaries. Does that sound familiar? He alone is the destructive force behind the last 3 levy failures, and I hope this convinces women in our community that he is not a rational or credible source for the counterpoint argument. Well, before I tell you the history of how we arrived at this massive explosion of angst, I want to tell you about a continuous argument my wife and I have about Costco and Walmart, and it applies. As you know, Costco, I think Costco is a wonderful place to shop. It's just, especially around the holidays, when you're feeding a large family, you can go in there with that big cart they give you and get a whole bunch of stuff. And it's 15% less than just about anywhere you get it otherwise. but it's a little far away from our house. We have to drive like 12 miles to get there. Walmart's much closer, but it's kind of messy, and you don't have the little badge to get in. You know, anybody can just walk in, so it's a little more chaotic. And you know, Costco's a little nicer, neater, and you feel a little special when you go there. But she likes Walmart because Walmart's always been there. We raised our family on Walmart, and you know, and Costco has milk for 99 cents. So we love to have that debate. And I listen to her talk. Sometimes I roll over in bed and she's talking about this stuff at 11 o'clock. and I listen. I try to follow along with it, but it's I think, wow, it's just fascinating that these two stories bring up so much discussion. But I think about those things because you know what drives them is competition. Because you have Costco and you have Walmart and you have Kroger and we had Biggs for a while, and you know, Biggs went out of business because they couldn't deal with Walmart, and you have this capitalism thing that was going on and keeps costs down. It forces all these executives at these places to drive hard bargain and bring their wages down to you know, well, we can go and get milk cheaply, and we like that. It's good for us. What you don't have in education is competition. And we're all suffering for it. We spend a lot of time trying to figure out how our tax dollars are going to be spent on silly things, like whether we can afford to have busing, or the kids can have a chance to play sports. Because at Lakota, they made the fees at $550 per child per sport. And that was punishment. I mean, we throw a lot of money at that. We have a budget that's over $200 million at Lakota. You'd like to have that.
Oh yeah.
You know, so it's not that we're short of money, but it's a lack of any kind of government control over their union contracts. It's a runaway train that nobody has their hand on, and it's driven by one factor. There's no competition. They have a monopoly. I didn't want to think bad about it when I first became involved in this whole levy business. It was actually back in 2004, 2005. I wasn't all that gung-ho about it. We just didn't want our taxes to go up. We kind of thought, no, it's no big deal. If it passes, it passes. And it's like every other parent. You know, our kids were going to school there at the time. And I just thought it was kind of a silly thing. So I did quotes in the paper, and I wrote little articles and things back then. And we defeated it 3 times and passed finally on the 4th. And I couldn't figure out why in the world every 6 months they kept putting it back on the ballot. It didn't make any sense to me. Because we just voted this thing down, now it's back. So what they did is, in 2005, they finally passed the thing. And teachers got their money in spring of 2006, I believe it was. And in 2008, 2 years later, they went on strike, threatened to. And they had their walkout, staged walkout. And they put the school board up against the rails and said, we demand more wages. And over the next year and a half, their average wage increase went up 11%, just skyrocketed, because just like where Boehner's at right now, you know, Barack Obama has him over the edge, bent him over a barrel. There's nothing he can really do. He has absolutely no cards to play, except for getting mean and nasty, you know, as far as a pushback. But he doesn't, you know, if we're playing poker, he has no cards. And the school board knew they had no leverage. They have no legislative support. The community at the time didn't have any backbone to stop it. And you know, and then they have all these employees they're dealing with, 2,000 some employees that are all union members that argue over a 0.5% increase on their health insurance premium. So they sure aren't going to argue wages. So they caved right before the walkout, and teachers ran off with the plunder. And 2 years later, they're asking for another levy. 2010. That's when they tried, the first attempt they tried, I did my thing like I did in 2004 and 2005, but a group of real estate people who simply were, after the housing bubble, they weren't selling things. They didn't have leased properties in their strip malls or whatnot, and they really couldn't afford an increase in taxes. What a lot of people don't understand about these tax increases are that businesses are taxed at the same rate as a house. So when they put out and say, well, it's only $33, per $100,000 or something like that, for your property, your assessment on your property, people think, well, my house is only worth, $120,000 or $200,000, whatever it is, and I can afford an extra $40 more. But they don't know that the Wendy's store is going to end up paying the cost in extra taxes, what he pays about 3 employees part-time a year in increased taxes. Because some of these properties are worth over $1 million, just little businesses in their assessment. So if you have a medium-sized business, and Westchester has a lot of industry, and we have quite a few distribution centers and places that are valued $15, $20 million buildings, and tax rate per $100,000 on those is a lot of money. So these guys took a stand and they started to resist it. So we had 2 groups that were resisting this levy, and it was defeated. And in the summer of 2010, they called me up and wanted to join forces because I had all this media stuff I was good at, and they just kind of wanted to help fund it. So we started a No Lakota levy, and our very first thing to attack with was the fact that we realized that at the time the average salary of Lakota, this sounds like not a whole lot now, but in 2010, way back then, it was $59,000 a year, the average salary. And I think Westchester is a pretty decent area. A lot of the incomes are pretty high. I think the average income there was $49,000 per person. Combined income per family, with a part-time kid working in the house and both parents working was like $94,000 per household. So the teachers were way above the average salary, and we were able to exploit that. So I called up WLW and volunteered to go on the air with all my data, and we went on the air and absolutely blew it wide open on 50,000 watts. And the Ohio Education Association about had a conniption. They really didn't know what to do with that, and no one had ever done that. And WLW gave me 40 minutes of airtime, and we just went down the list. I broke off everybody who made over $5,000 a year. We went in there and basically routed off the numbers and showed how many people. It's 431 people, employees were over $65,000 a year. So we said before you have the discussion about more taxes, you needed to figure out if these people were worth more than $65,000 a year. Because what do they do? I mean, you have a contract that says you work 7.5 hours a day, 5 days a week. You do some stuff at home, but you're off during the summer. Pretty good gig. Does it justify that much money? And of course they said, well, we do this and we do that, and we are the future. We are your children. We are the futures of your children. We care for them while you're off building busy lives for yourselves and doing your careers. We watch them. We're there for them. And you started getting this really radical rhetoric. And through the debate, which was friendly at first, we just kept it on the numbers and forced them to look at the numbers and address them, which they never could. And all the time, I probably went on WLW 40 or 50 times. They're all on my YouTube account. You can go back and listen to them all. They're all on my blog. You can Google it. They're all out there on public record. And what I found is that they never could, no matter how many times I went on and brought numbers up, talk numbers, just raw numbers, just talk about it. They could never counter it. No union rep ever came on and debated me on the air, which we invited. We invited counterpoint. Never happened because they couldn't. They could not do it. They could not justify what they were doing. They could not articulate their value as employees. Now, again, I said I've done a little bit of managing in my life, and I've done some, budget. We have to fit things into a budget, and the first thing you do if you're top heavy, if what you're making for whatever your product line is, if it doesn't justify people at the top of the wage scale, if they don't justify it, you dump them, you cut them, you let them go, you drift them off. It's old dead wood that's not making your business profitable. Same thing should really kind of occur in school. If you have a bunch of teachers that are making $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 a year, 7.5 hours a day, well, why wouldn't you hire the sharp young lady right out of Miami University to teach for $45,000 a year and do the same thing? Well, because you have to have a master's degree and you have to do all these things. That's what they tell you. But why do we need that for a kid in kindergarten? Does a first grader need a master's degree? Well, it's state law. And then you realize that the OEA's pushed all these representatives for years to lobby and get these things put in place so they have this argument. So they've got the whole thing laid out, and you can't fight it. So then you say, well, if you're not going to listen to me, then we'll beat you by not giving you the money. We're just going to say no and force your hand. So this went on for a while, and I made a conscious decision, unlike last time, where I just sort of let it go. This time, I was going to ratchet it up a little bit every time they tried, because it's not fair. We told you no. Now, you go back to Obama, Prince Obama. He has a mandate. He won 51% of the vote. And that means 49% of everybody else. Tough luck. Prince Obama bowed to him. Well, in Lakota, we won 53% of the vote. And they lost 43 or something like that. 47%. We had a mandate. But if you're conservative, that's not the same rules. Only if you're progressive do those rules work. So we didn't have a mandate. That meant you put it back on the ballot. Does that make sense? Does this make sense to anybody? Because only if you're that type of person, over there on the left, only if you're on the left do those rules apply. If you're on the right, you're in a different universe. You function from a whole different set of rules. So what I found fascinating about the whole thing was that it seemed to be a scam. And the more I sat down with school board members, and I'm now friends with school board people from all over the state. There's a lot of members, former and present, and they're all trying hard, but they'll tell me, hands are tied, rules say this is, the lawyers will do this to us if we do this, we really can't do a whole lot. Well, what's the point of having an election? Because you have to kind of get the public to buy into it. I mean, that's kind of what it comes out to. So, once you realize that, then you realize that this is an unmanaged situation. You can't get it under control, traditionally. I originally thought, along with a lot of my friends in No Lakota Levy, which were people who, many of them are very wealthy, they own quite a few of the businesses in Westchester. And they simply, it's not that they don't want to pay their fair share, which that argument comes up. Ironic how when you start discussing this, they say, well, you guys are all a bunch of meanies and you're greedy, wealthy people who just don't want to pay your fair share of the taxes. And then you come back around to the same argument that we're hearing in this fiscal clip. You heard today. Obama didn't want to even have it at 400,000. He said, wealthy people like me, he makes 400,000 a year, plus he sells a few books. Wealthy people like me, we should be paying higher taxes. And Mr. Boehner thinks that at $900,000, well, that person at $900,000 can't pay taxes, but the guy at $1 million can. So he's trying to push to get it lower and lower and lower. And I'll get into what I think is the ultimate principle there. You don't want to think bad things about these people because they're our friends, they're our neighbors, they're around our children. But you realize you have a situation, you have no competition, so you have no control, and you have a political entity that has absolutely no desire to turn the water off. None. Because everybody benefits from it a little bit. But if you're a politician, you have political capital because you can use children as the leverage to get what you want passed and done. I mean, that's what they're doing with gun control right now. You know, there's these kids that were killed, sad, but the big difference is they're not teenagers in a Batman theater. They're children in a classroom. And I wrote on my blog the other day, well, I mean, wouldn't that mean that schools are dangerous? Because these things happen in schools. And so when you outlaw schools, wouldn't it be safer just to homeschool everybody? You know, just to throw devil's advocate ideas out there. Of course, that brings a lot of hatred, and people get very upset about that. But, you know, it's easier to blame the Second Amendment because there's a deeper agenda that you get into. Again, I'll get into that towards the end here. And I don't want to get on and go down a spiral web because, you know, we're here to try and figure out how to solve our fiscal problems. And what we can do is, as community, I hate to say activists because I always think of a bunch of progressive hippies when I say that. But, you know, that's what we're doing. We're being, trying to be responsible for the finances of our areas, whatever we're dealing with. And it just takes that effort. But we'll find out there's a different game that is being played. And the rules are not the rules we're playing by. And that's what I realized in the coding. And it's not that the people who are directly involved are quite aware of it. It's just like when you work at a certain company and your boss might be a dirty, rotten scoundrel. And you know he's taking money and buying boats and spending it on prostitutes and, you know, maybe going and blowing money at a gambling casino. But you work there, you keep your mouth shut, you kind of go through the motions because you want to keep your job. You find it in the schools, you have the same kind of situation. You have a radical teacher union that's very hell-bent on financing a progressive agenda. And they need revenue to put politicians that reflect their ideas in office. And they do that with those union dues. And this is why they fight right-to-work laws so viciously. A lot of teachers, a good portion of them, let's say a lot of them, a good portion of them would like options, but they don't have them. Those options are not available because you have a monopoly that is controlled by a labor union that has a progressive agenda. And even if you're a smart person and you want to do well and you want to make it work because you want good things for the kids and you want good things for your community and you want property values to be good for your homes, you have all the right intentions, you tend to look at just that place. And you don't want to think about the things you can't do anything about. So you only look, you don't think about the boss that's out at the casino. You just come in and you do your job every day and you work and you hope that it means something. Fortunately, you do that for 20 or 30 years and you find out, you made your money, you earned your retirement, nothing changed. The guy was still a scumbag and did what scumbags do. But your life kind of got passed over and you earn your little piece of it and you retire and things happen anyway. Well, we're at a place in education, public education, where it's not working. We're not the best in the world in education in the United States. I think we're like number 17. I don't know if that's changed. I think it's what it was a few years ago. We're spending more money than ever. After this bubble burst, the real estate thing happened, and now you have this incredible debt that we have. You have a political system that's just suggesting throwing more and more money at that type of education. It's not working. So The only thing I can think of is you need competition. So I started to get involved with the Workplace Freedom Amendment, trying to get Governor Casey to buy into that. Of course, he didn't want to do that after issue 2. So Michigan has it, Indiana has it, Wisconsin has this stuff. Ohio's probably going to be behind the curve on it a little bit. And I'm also been involved a little bit with school choice, so that kids get the money instead of the district. And that would make jobs like yours terrible, because you have to know how much money's coming in to manage your costs. But
My job's already terrible.
right. Yeah, I mean, if you're a school board and all that, and you need to manage your costs, that's hard to do. But for the sake of education, the model we have is irreparably broken. It cannot be salvaged. The only thing that can salvage it is competition. The same kind of competition that you find in sports. You have playoffs. Bengals are in the playoffs. How about that? Who would ever guess that? Or they will be, most likely. But you find that people understand capitalism when it applies to sports, but they don't get it when it applies to things like education and politics. And when you have a system that's protected from the inside, you stop growing because there's nothing there to push to make people better. Now, I think that the arguments we had at Lakota made people better. I think it's made them sharper. They've had to watch their finances much more acutely. And I think it's forced them to make hires that they otherwise wouldn't make. So it's been better and healthier. And if we weren't there, and that's why I say they may not like me, but I think ultimately it's a stronger school district because of it. They would be a stronger school district if they had to compete with Fairfield or Talawanda or Lebanon or Mason directly for the dollars for the kid, and that would drive those costs down. Unions never let it happen as long as they have a monopoly. But because of the situation being what it is, there is currently the model, if you project it out on a graph, there is absolutely no way it's sustainable. Just like our debt. At a certain point within the next 4 or 5 years, you run into where your interest rates are higher than what you can pay back, and you have incredible hyperinflation that you'll never recover from. And we're dangerously close to that as a nation, and we're already there with our schools. So I don't want to go on forever and ever. I could talk. I told Carl I could talk till midnight if you let me. But I won't do that to you because that's a lot of information to throw at you at one time. So to come back around to why I said what I said, it's healthy if you're going to be in these discussions to have people who, they might be mad at you. They might call you names. And when they call me names, I call them right back because I personally don't want to hear it. And I don't deserve it. And I'm going to give it back to you. And I kind of wish Boehner would do the same thing. I wish Republicans would do that. But, conservatives are, most of us are good people. We don't like to fight. We don't want to be ruckus, cause trouble. We just want to live our lives and do the right thing. And, most of us are religious, and we're taught to turn the other cheek and all those good things. But when if you read my blog, I get very passionate about some of this stuff. But if you're dealing with godless heathens, people who don't believe in anything, and a lot of these people don't. I've known a lot of politicians. I've met politicians at all different levels. And I can tell you, a lot of them are soulless. Most of them are there to, no different than pirates. They're there to plunder all they can get and make it work to their advantage, and that's all they care about. And that's state reps, it's city council people, and they'll do it, especially if you're asleep. If you're just tending to your garden, which we all just want to do, just going shopping, just watching TV, or going to Costco, they're gonna find a way to steal the money, and they're gonna use it for their own advantage. And the only protection you have is to use the political system with groups like this to be diligent about it. Because without it, they're crooks. and you can't trust them. And you have to understand that. So, it's okay if people, they may believe they're doing the right thing, like some of these women that I was talking about. They believe they're doing the right thing for the children. They want good schools for their kids. They want their real estate investments to be profitable. They want a return on them when their kids graduate and they leave and sell it to somebody else. That's what they want. So they believe they're protecting that by lashing out at me. But what they don't understand, because they lack all the pieces of the puzzle, is that they can't just throw money at the situation. You have to manage it. And by being a little bit of a stick in the mud, you force them to manage their finances. And when you do that, it's unpopular, and we're going to be unpopular as a group. It's hated. I've heard the teabagger thing more times than I care to articulate. I find it abysmal that people like Bill Maher and Van Jones can say whatever they want about us. And if we say anything contrary to that, you get treated like that. You never see things like that with Van Jones, except for maybe on the Glenn Beck show. And there's a double standard, and we're dealing with a double standard. But here's where I might be going over the edge a little bit. But I'll tell you my opinion after dealing with all this stuff. Evil is real. Evil is a very real problem. And in some cases, we're dealing with evil. Because evil is absolutely selfish. And it's greedy. And it thinks only about its own little survival at the expense of everyone else. And to do good is very difficult. And I think this group here is every single one of you is trying to do good. And just understand as we go into 2013 that just doing good sometimes isn't enough. Sometimes you have to do good and be willing to confront evil because it's there. And you have to look it in the face. And sometimes that's the best thing you can do, is let them know what they are. And maybe force them to look in the mirror and change their ways. So with that, is there any questions? Stunned silence.
Waiting for the bullwhip.
I didn't bring it. I do have my holster on. That is my whip holster.
Have your efforts resulted in a different profile of the school board uniform?
We're working on that. There are 3 seats open this year, and I'm trying to get people to actively take those seats, because you have to have people on the school board who are willing to ask questions, not just lay down and just go with the flow. And again, I know quite a few school board members, and you are. They have that thing, Levy University up in Columbus, they do every year after the election.
What is that?
It's done by the OSBA, and they have a class they teach on how to pass levies, and in that class they teach you how to, if you're a management group, how to take away busing to leverage, against the community and that kind of thing. They don't come out and say it that way. They're very polite about it, right? They do. There's a book on it and everything. And but they do it every year. OSBA, they bring you in, and it's like a big party, and all the people who are school board members, it's a way of trying to bring you into the fold. And if you resist it, then you find I don't know about Talawanda. I think you guys have a pretty decent system out here. But I know Mason and Lebanon and Springboro and Fairfield, especially Inglock, Fairfield. A lot of contention. The goal with these school boards is often to try to build a consensus, because you show a unified front, for the votes, and it shows that the board's unified. So one of the tactics I did during the no Lakota levy stuff was there were certain people on the school board that I identified with, and we actually supported. And that caused a rift within the ranks, and I was able to play them against each other politically. We actually did a very funny bit on WLW where one group that was kind of on my side, and the other one, they had a verbal, altercation. It was on camera, and we actually had a recording of it. We played Rocky music on WLW, and and it sort of just had a little fun with it to show that there wasn't a unified school board. And it was basically what we're trying to do is show there's not a consensus, that not everybody's voting in line, because we want to show that we're trying to manage this. And if you have everybody votes 5-1 or 5-0, whatever, then that's their way of showing that everybody's behind the superintendent, whatever the recommendation might be. And that's not good. Not everybody should agree. What you need to have is a spirited debate, opposing points of view, everybody hash it out. You shake hands at the end of it. Everybody get along, maybe we get an ice cream or something. But it's okay to fight and argue. Because what you always hear from the left is you have this thing called compromise. And no, compromising is a dirty word. Because usually there's only one right answer. If 2 + 2 = 4, but a leftist type person wants to say it's 6. You don't compromise and say, well, okay, it's 5. A right answer is a right answer. And you got to find out what the right answer is. And you might be wrong. But you have to have the guts to say, hey, my bad, I'm wrong. Hey, you're right. You brought out some good points. And be willing to, if you're going to be in a group of management, which is what school board people are, that you're willing to go to the toe and maybe not vote if you don't agree, and don't let them twist your arm and vote in favor of it. That's why we're trying to get three people who have some business experience on the school board. Very hard to do because then the unions stack it up, and if you put too many candidates out there, then they can support somebody in a minority person who only has 4,000 or 5,000 votes can become a school board member. That's what happened with one of the people who came on last year. We had 2 good, strong conservative candidates, but they split the conservative vote, and the progressive-leaning one got the majority. So it's tricky business, but you have to keep trying, and again, we're trying to do that. Until you do that, there's no way of controlling the cost. Because there's no one's going to stand up. I mean, the unions are scary. They have scary activism presence. And then they do. They vandalize. They're being very good now because there's attention on it. But in 2008 and 2009, yes, they did vandalize mailboxes. They did slash tires. They did break out windows. And when we started exposing it, one of the reasons I created the blog, and I'll wrap it up here because I don't want to hold you guys all night. I created the blog because I couldn't get good press out of the media. I couldn't get the Pulse Journal to cover me adequately. I got 2 or 3 lines, but I had a lot more to say than 2 or 3 lines, obviously. The Cincinnati Enquirer would give me 3 or 4 lines, and I could make my statement in that period. But you always had counter argument, and then of course the superintendent Lakota gets a whole 1,200 article comment every single week platform to talk about what she's doing for the community and how the school fits into it and all that kind of stuff. So I had to have something that people could come to where so I created my own blog. Because you can do that these days. You can do that on the internet. You can have websites and you can compete. And that's the big thing is now, and I think it's what caused trouble with the Enquirer. I was in good terms with them for a long time, and I actually had Michael Clark tell me that my blog had too many viewers, and that if I posted something, I give him tips. When there was a sex scandal or some teacher was doing some crazy thing with a student, I'd put it on my blog and I'd tip him off. And at one particular time, he told me, "Did you post this on your blog yet?" I said, "Yeah." But that's illegitimate media. That's just fun stuff. He said, no, that's not the way I see it. The Enquirer sees you as competition. Like, oh. He said, so if you're going to give me a story, make sure you give me the story before you post it. Well, okay. So I made that agreement with him. We did that for a little while. But as it came down, I think he offered to take me, before we did the hit piece here that I was talking about in his meeting, he offered to take me to lunch. And I think he wanted to confess some things, and we never got around to it. And a few weeks later is when this whole thing blew up. But I think he was feeling bad, and I think he was under some pressure, because I get 700-800 hits on that thing every single day. And I make sure to write something every day because people like, whether it's education related or not, I write something there to just keep people entertained and keep them coming back. And it's almost become a full-time newspaper kind of thing. But it's been very effective. And when my friend Doc Thompson, who used to be down here in Dublin, and by the way, he's going to be syndicated now, coming January 13th. He's getting a syndicated show, so he's competing. He's going to be coming behind Glenn Beck. He's going to have a national audience, and station's going to sign up to get him on. Anyway, when he was down here, him and I got along great, had a great time. I still do things on his show every now and then up in Detroit. He told me a little bit what was going on inside WLW. There was a lot of pressure. The unions had no answer. They couldn't stand the fact that we had this public discourse, and they did everything they could to put leverage on Clear Channel and the Inquirer, Gannett News, to shut that voice down. Got to get under control, because it was fun when it made some good stories, but when you start getting into the nitty gritty, when people start complaining they can't sell their home because you haven't passed a levy, and real estate agents get so used to selling homes on whether you pass a levy or not, right? They tied it to your real estate values, so they start blaming that. So the newspapers get a lot of ad money from real estate developers. So they say, we're going to cut our ad money if you keep doing this kind of stuff because we can't sell stuff. So if you haven't noticed lately, the Inquirer is mainly all ads, because they had to cut all the reporters because people like me write blogs, and people don't care about their news because it's all gushy, hogwash. So it's a threat, and you're going to make enemies, but it doesn't matter as long as you do the right thing. In the end, it all comes out in the wash, and you try to keep it clean so that you can shake hands at the end of the day and live your life. In some cases, it's not possible. And there are during this process, there are people I'll never shake hands with again, because you feelings do get raw, and you do cross a point of no return. And I'm that way with quite a few people. And I do hold a grudge for a long time. But it's okay, because all that matters is your family. Yes?
How do you find time to make a living?
I do everything around the house.
There's the answer.
That is true to a large extent. I do type very fast. I write a lot. I typically can do about 1,200 words in a half hour. But I have a Word on my phone, and I write when I'm on conference calls. I write when I'm walking around the hallways here and there. I write. I never waste time. So I usually plot out my stuff and write them, and then I get home and articulate them while I watch the news and listen to the radio and listen to her tell about her day. But she does most of the things around the house, which frees me up. And she, including hanging drywall and fixing electrical appliances and things like that. So she does a lot of stuff. But to those people who think I hate women, I have 2 daughters, and I think they like me, and I like them. And I've been married for a long time, and I don't think she'd stay married to me if I was a big old misogynist. Yeah. But yeah, she does her part by keeping me free to be able to do those kinds of things. And it takes a lot of time.
Good. Thank you.